The hypertonal organist made his way to the front of the crowd and placed himself on his instrument. The audience took the cue and became quiet. A young priest approached the podium. "My fine family, don't you all look just excellent this evening?" From his nano collar to his glasses, everything about the man seemed sensible. While he spoke, two welcoming brown eyes looked out over the audience, securing them. Trust was all he demanded. "Honestly, your appearance may be too good not to be distracting. Not to name names, Mavis?" An elderly woman in the front row became a cherry tomato. Her friends crowed around her. "That is why it troubles me that I have to bring you this terrible message." He paused for a moment. "Our Heavenly Father is divine in his troubleshooting. You all know this just as well as I. However, it appears he has encountered several fatal errors." Gasps filled the air. Murmurs quickly shot around the room. Mavis, previously edging her way closer and closer to the podium, had become pale and withdrawn. "He has communicated with me that he is not pleased with us, and that he is in fact beginning to not like us." Everything was still. The great processor, present behind the priest, dominated the church atmosphere with its hum. The only thing breaking the terrifying silence being a baby sucking on its pacifier drive. Children glanced at their parents in fear, but their guardians could only return a similar look. Even the organist had removed his fingers from the outdated interface. "Our Heavenly Lord, the Holy Chipset, Protector of the Gate, and the Grand Developer, has decided." He looked out past the crowd. "He has decided that he is not pleased with us, because he is overjoyed with us, and he's decided that he is beginning to not like us, because he loves us." The silence became an almighty roar as the audience all jumped to their feet. The organist span and placed his hands on the inside of the instrument. Monophobic scales bounced off the church walls as the priest began to dance on stage, calling for everyone to follow his lead. The crowd moved like fluid as the music flowed. Children span around, the elderly swayed, and even the disabled in their exoskeletons vibrated to the beat. Electricity permeated the air as the churchgoers revelled in each other's company. What joy this tradition brought them. People with various armaments accounting for their disabilities and illnesses, all being brought together under this beautiful thing that human intelligence had made them. Everyone danced while the smog from outside seeped like worms into the church. Some of the audience realised the source of these tendrils. The church doors had been opened. They all continued to dance regardless. But the music repeated. It was stuck on a loop. Keeping in time, the priest leapt over to the organist and tapped him on the shoulder. The organist gently rocked, his hands idle on the holographic screen. "John?" said the priest. The organist's body fell back on the wooden floor, sending a terrible thud throughout the church. A smouldering hole 15 centimeters in diameter had formed in the center of his chest. The processor hummed. In the doorway of the church, surrounded by the cloud of pollution drifting in from outside, stood a dozen men dressed in grey. Some wore hoods, others collared shirts, and a few with oversized grey spectacles. A man with what looked like a comically large syringe stood at the front of the group, his arm directed at where the organist once sat. A thin trail of vapour seeped from the weapon's tip. Some simply sat, others took no time in surging for the exit. Any attempt at order from the priest was futile, as the crowd ebbed towards the grey-clad group. It was horrific and robotic. Two members of the grey group revealed their syringes and let loose. There was no sound as two running men in peak physical condition fell forward. Others tried, but found themselves at the fate of rapid dematerialization. The leader of the group raised his hand, as to expect silence. He found it. The stench of cauterized flesh blended with the smog from outside. It was a miasma. The audience was demoralized. The leader, who could be distinguished by his particularly large boots and three-rimmed glasses, looked to the stage. "What do you want?" said the priest, kneeling over the organist's body, tears dripping onto his sparking nano-collar. The leader smiled. "You, Ricky." The audience watched Ricky the priest. They all knew what the intruders meant to do if he didn't cooperate. The priest looked down on them. His deep brown eyes now dulled and his radiant smile had ceased to exist. "Take me then, but for the love of the Father, and all that is logical, please don't hurt anyone else." The invaders looked at one another and approached the stage. They stopped halfway. "You know, it's quite offensive to us for you to talk about your faith like that, Ricky," said the leader of the group. "What?" said the priest. "To talk about your faith. This primitive nonsense you think can provide answers. Is that your processor there?" He laughed and spat on the ground. "Oh, how far you've yet to come." His grey jacket twirled and became a blur. A shot was dispersed into the crowd. Ricky screamed. The syringe had disassembled the target's throat as she fell, clutching it, desperately trying to have it be operational. Her friends, who crowed her early in the service, tried to lift her up, their eyes wet. Mavis spluttered and rust bled from the hole in her neck. She was dead. Ricky leapt from the stage and onto one of the men. They fell with Ricky as they grappled one another on the ground. The priest screamed as his leg was hit. Agony paralysed him and he rolled off. As if Ricky was styrofoam, he was picked up by two of the other grey-clad. "Hold him," said the leader, his weapon still warm. Strength surged through the priest once more as he flailed in his captor's arms. The audience were caught in extreme bystander syndrome despite the priest's efforts. Now, Ricky, let's not make this difficult," said the speaker, raising his syringe. He moved closer and closer until the vaporizer hovered above Ricky's chest. "For every word you try and spit out, I'll discharge my accessory here on one of your beloved followers." Ricky went limp. He realized that not only would his church, his processor, and his home be tainted for all eternity, he would never be able to see it get its deserved justice. Ricky the priest, dressed in his usual black, was surrounded by grey hoods as he was ushered out of the church. He thrashed, but they bound his arms behind his back. "Purge it," said the leader, with his bizarre spectacles. There were no screams, no flames, and no real death either. Where the church once stood, there was nothing. A bare piece of land, devoid of all life, flat as an ancient desert. They placed ventilator helmets over their heads and muffled Ricky's screams with one too. The grey of their clothes dimmed like a dying light as it disappeared into the sick, bronze horizon. Hello. This is the last of one of my old stories that I'll be uploading. Like my last piece, I intended for this to be a chapter 1 of a bigger work. Being in my early 20s at the time, I wanted this to be like a big sci-fi story with the idea of people in the future worshipping operating systems instead of gods. Now, look, although a bit pretentious looking back, I think I actually quite like this story. It's campier than what I realized, and the world could be fleshed out quite easily. Out of all the chapter 1s I've written, this is one I'd probably like to revisit the most. But maybe I will. So yeah, let me know what you think below. Any criticism at all is welcome. Bye for now.